My daughter moved to Europe and abandoned my grandson with me. With no money, I asked for $40 for formula, but I sent it to the wrong number. The reply was, "You are a warrior." The next day, $10,000 and a box at my door. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought my own daughter would look me in the eye and lie so convincingly, but there Sarah was standing in my small living room, with her suitcase in one hand and baby Tommy balanced on her hip, telling me the most elaborate story about a temporary business opportunity in Europe that would change everything for her family. "It's just for 6 months, Mom," she said, her voice steady as stone. "David's company is opening a branch in Paris, and they specifically requested him. The salary is incredible, enough to finally pay off our debts and get us back on our feet." I watched her bounce Tommy gently, his 8-month-old eyes wide and trusting as he gazed at his mother. My heart ached seeing how attached he was to her, how his tiny fingers clutched at her shirt whenever she moved. "But why can't you take Tommy with you?" he asked, though deep down I think I already knew the answer. Sarah's face tightened for just a moment before she plastered on that smile I'd seen her use with bill collectors and landlords. "The housing situation is complicated. David's company is providing temporary housing, but it's not suitable for a baby. Know how these corporate arrangements are. Once we get settled and find our own place, we'll send for Tommy." Immediately, the way she said "send for Tommy" made my stomach churn like he was a package to be shipped when convenient. "Sarah, honey, I'm already working 2 jobs just to keep up with my own bills. Arthritis medication alone costs more than I make some weeks. And now with winter coming, the heating bills. Please." Sarah's voice took on that edge it got when she was frustrated. "You raised me just fine on your own. Easy baby. He sleeps through the night, and I've already bought enough formula and diapers to last a month. We'll send money as soon as David gets his first paycheck." I looked at Tommy, who was now reaching for me with chubby arms, making those soft baby sounds that melted my heart every time. How could I say no? He was my grandson, my flesh and blood. "Besides," Sarah continued, settling Tommy into my arms, "you've been saying how much you miss having a little one around. Remember how you used to tell me that the house felt too quiet after I moved out? That was 20 years ago. I wanted to say I was 43 then, not 63 with arthritis in my hands and a back that screamed at me every morning when I got out of bed." But Tommy snuggled against my chest, his warm little body fitting perfectly in the crook of my arm. And I felt that familiar surge of unconditional love that comes with being a grandmother. 6 months, I said firmly. "And you'll call every day to check on?" Course, Mom. Every single day." That was 3 months ago. The call stopped after the first week. Now, as I stood in the baby formula aisle at the grocery store, Tommy strapped to my chest in a carrier I'd bought secondhand, I felt the weight of that lie crushing down on me. My Social Security barely covered my rent and medications. The 2 jobs I worked, cleaning offices at night and watching Mrs. Peterson's elderly mother during the day, brought in just enough to keep the lights on. Tommy started fussing, his cries echoing through the or. Other shoppers glanced our way, some with sympathy, others with annoyance. I bounced him gently, whispering soothing words, but I knew what he needed. He was hungry, and I had exactly $12 in my wallet. Formula cost $18. I picked up the cheapest can, turned it over in my hands, reading the same nutrition label I'd memorized weeks ago. My arthritic fingers ached as I gripped the metal container. And for a moment I considered putting it in my cart and hoping my card wouldn't be declined again. "Excuse me, ma'am." I turned to find a store employee, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read, "Jessica. Are you okay? You look a little pale." The concern in her voice almost broke me. When was the last time someone had asked if I was okay? When was the last time anyone had looked at me and seen more than just another struggling senior citizen? "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice came out shakier than I intended. Jessica glanced at Tommy, who had quieted, but was still making those hungry whimpers that tore at my heart. "Is this your grandson?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "He's beautiful. Old. Months." The words felt heavy, loaded with all the responsibility I never asked for but couldn't abandon. Tommy chose that moment to let out a wail that could probably be heard 3 miles over. Jessica's expression softened even more. "Listen," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "My shift ends in 20 minutes. If you need to wait until your next check comes in, I understand." Been there. The kindness of strangers. It was something I'd heard about but rarely experienced. Here was this young woman, probably making minimum wage herself, offering to help me in the only way she could. "Thank you," I whispered. "But I'll figure something out." And I would. I always did. I left the store empty-handed that day, Tommy's cries following me to the parking lot. In the car I tried calling Sarah one more. Straight to voicemail again. "Hi, you've reached Sarah. I can't take your call right now, but leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible." The same cheerful voice that had promised to call every day. The same voice that had assured me this was temporary. That night, as I gave Tommy a bottle made with the last of the formula, diluted just slightly to make it stretch, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to swallow my pride and ask for help. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, had always been kind, bringing me soup when I was sick, checking on me during bad weather. Surely she would understand. I stared at my phone for nearly an hour before I finally worked up the courage to type the message. My fingers, stiff with arthritis, moved slowly across the screen, each word feeling like an admission of failure. "Hi, Mrs. Chen. Hope you don't mind me asking, but I'm in a tight spot. Could I borrow $40 for baby formula? I can pay you back Friday, when my check comes in. I'm so sorry to ask." My thumb hovered over the send button. 63 years old and asking neighbors for money to feed my grandson. This wasn't how I'd imagined my golden years would look. Tommy was sleeping peacefully in the portable crib I'd set up in my bedroom, his tiny chest rising and falling in that perfect rhythm that only babies have. He'd been fussier than usual today, probably sensing my stress. Babies always know when something's wrong. I pressed send before I could change my mind. The response came back so quickly it made me jump. "You are a warrior woman." I frowned at the screen. That didn't sound like Mrs. Chen at all. She was sweet but formal, and English wasn't her first language. This message was too confident, too American. Before I could process what was happening, my phone buzzed with another notification. This time it was my banking app. Deposit $10,000 0. I stared at the screen, certain I was hallucinating from exhaustion. $10,000. That couldn't be right. I closed the app and opened it again. The number was still there. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. This had to be a mistake. Banks didn't just deposit $10,000 into accounts by accident, did they? I scrolled back to the text message, checking the number. I'd sent my plea to. It wasn't Mrs. Chen's number. In my desperation, I'd somehow sent my most humiliating moment to a complete stranger. And that stranger had just sent me $10,000. My first instinct was panic. This was too much money to be a mistake, which meant it was either illegal or there were strings attached. Big, dangerous strings. I'd heard about scams where people sent money and then demanded it back with interest, claiming you'd stolen from them. I tried calling the number. It rang once and went straight to voicemail. No greeting, just a beep. "Hello," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I think there's been a mistake. I sent you a text by accident, and now there's money in my account that doesn't belong to me. Please call me back so we can fix this." I hung up and immediately called my bank. After 20 minutes of being transferred between departments, I finally reached someone who could access my account. "Mrs. Williams. I show a legitimate wire transfer from a verified account. The transaction is clean and complete, but I don't know who sent it." Protested. "Has to be a mistake. Sender would have needed your full name and account number to complete the transfer. Are you sure you don't know who might have sent this?" I wasn't sure of anything anymore. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Tommy slept beside me. The money was real. Whoever had sent it knew exactly who I was and where to find me. The thought should have terrified me, but instead I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Oh, with $10,000 I could buy formula. I could pay my rent 3 months in advance. I could get my prescription filled without having to choose between medication and groceries. But it felt wrong. This wasn't my money. The next morning I was changing Tommy's diaper when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a delivery man holding a large, elegant box. "Martha Williams." I nodded, though every instinct told me not to accept whatever this was. "Sign here, please." The box was heavy, wrapped in expensive-looking paper with a silver ribbon. There was no return address, just my name written in elegant script across a cream-colored card. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were the most beautiful baby clothes I'd ever seen. Organic cotton onesies and soft pastels, tiny sweaters that probably cost more than I made in a week, and at the bottom the most expensive formula money could buy. Enough to last months, but it was the note that made my blood run cold. "For the warrior who fights alone, you are seen. You are valued. Do not look for me." I dropped the card like it was on fire. Someone was watching me. Someone knew about my struggles. Knew I was caring for Tommy alone. Knew I'd been fighting to keep us both afloat. Who was this person? And what did they want from me? Tommy gurgled happily from his bouncy seat, completely unaware that our lives had just taken a turn into something that felt both miraculous and terrifying. I picked up one of the tiny outfits, feeling the softness of the fabric between my fingers. Part of me wanted to pack everything back up, return the money, and pretend this had never happened. But as I looked at Tommy, his eyes bright and trusting as he reached for the colorful toys that had also been in the box, I knew I couldn't. Whatever this was, whoever was behind it, they had given my grandson what I couldn't provide. For the first time in months, I didn't have to worry about stretching formula or choosing between Tommy's needs and my own. I was grateful, but I was also scared. In my experience, nothing good ever came without a price. The question was, what would this generosity eventually cost me? Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here. Packages kept coming. Every few days, another elegant delivery would arrive at my door. Educational toys that Tommy loved. Organic baby food and flavors I'd never heard of. Even a high-end stroller that folded with the touch of a button. Each package came with the same type of note, written in that same careful script. For the warrior's little prince, or because every battle deserves the best armor. The notes were starting to unnerve me more than comfort me. I'd been trying to act normal, to pretend that my life hadn't been turned upside down by a stranger's inexplicable generosity. But normal was hard to maintain when your neighbors started whispering behind their curtains every time a delivery truck pulled up to your modest duplex. Martha sure is getting a lot of packages lately. I heard Mrs. Patterson say to her husband as I brought in Tommy from our daily walk. She didn't bother lowering her voice. Wonder where she's getting the money for all that fancy stuff. I pretended not to hear her, but comment stung. I'd lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. Watched Mrs. Patterson's own grandchildren grow up. Brought her casseroles when her husband was in the hospital. Now she was looking at me with suspicion, as if I'd suddenly become someone she couldn't trust. It got worse when Tommy's new stroller caught the attention of other mothers at the park. The old me would have been invisible among the young moms with their designer diaper bags and matching outfits. But now, pushing a stroller that cost more than some people's rent, I stood out in all the wrong ways. That's a bugaboo fox, one mother said to another, loud enough for me to hear. Those retail for like $1,500. Must be nice to have family money. Family money. If only she knew that my family had abandoned me with their responsibility, while they lived it up in Europe. I tried calling Sarah again that afternoon. This time the call went through. Sarah's voice was bright. Too bright with laughter and music in the background. How's my baby boy doing? He's fine. No thanks to you, I said, trying to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Sarah, it's been 3 months. When are you coming back for him? There was a pause and I could hear her moving away from whatever party or gathering she was. Actually, Mom, that's why I'm calling. David's assignment got extended. The company loves his work and they're offering him a permanent position here. We're thinking of making Paris our home base. My heart sank. About Tommy. Well, that's the thing. We'd love to bring him over, but the paperwork for infant immigration is so complicated. And honestly, he's doing so well with you. You always said I was too young when I had him, that I didn't know what I was doing. This way he gets the stability he needs. I felt the familiar burn of being manipulated, of having my own words twisted and used against me. Yes, I'd worried when Sarah got pregnant. At 26 with a man she'd only known for 8 months. Yes, I'd suggested they wait. Get more established. But I'd never said she was unfit to be a mother. Sarah, I'm 63 years old. I'm working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I can't raise a baby, but you're doing such a great. Her voice had that wheedling quality it got when she wanted something. And didn't you say you were lonely after I moved out? Now you have Tommy to keep you company. The manipulation was so obvious it made me sick. She was rewriting history, making it sound like this arrangement was some kind of gift she was giving me instead of an abandonment. I need you to send money for his care, I said firmly. Diapers, formula, doctor's visits. It all costs money I don't have. Course, Mom. David's first real paycheck should come through next month. We'll send something then. Next month. Always next month. After I hung up, I sat on my couch holding Tommy, who was happily chewing on a teething ring that had come in one of the mysterious packages. He looked up at me with those trusting blue eyes, completely unaware that his mother had just formally abandoned him. That evening I was giving Tommy his bath when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the bathroom window, I could see a black sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted and I couldn't make out who was inside, but something about it made my skin crawl. Car stayed there for almost an hour. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the sedan was gone. The officer, a tired-looking man in his 40s, took down my information with obvious reluctance. "Has anyone threatened you?" "Directly, ma'am." "No, but someone's been sending me packages, and now there's a car watching my house." "Packages? What kind of packages?" I hesitated. How could I explain that a stranger had been showering me with expensive gifts without sounding either crazy or suspicious? "Baby supplies for my grandson." The officer looked around my modest living room, taking in the expensive stroller, the high-end toys scattered around, the designer diaper bag hanging by the door. "And you don't know who's sending them?" "No, I think someone might have the wrong address." Even as I said it, I knew how ridiculous it sounded. Wrong address. But they knew. Name. Wrong address. But everything was perfectly suited to Tommy's age and needs. The officer closed his notebook. "Ma'am, unless someone makes direct threats or you see them on your property, there's not much we can do. Maybe you have a secret admirer." He chuckled at his own joke, completely missing the fear in my eyes. After he left, I double-checked all the locks and closed every curtain in the house. Tommy fussed more than usual that night, picking up on my anxiety. I found myself checking the windows repeatedly, looking for that black car. The next morning brought another package. This one was different, smaller, more personal. Inside was a silver locket, old-fashioned and delicate, with a photograph of Tommy and me that someone had taken at the park. We were sitting on a bench, Tommy on my lap, both of us laughing at something outside the frame of the picture. I had no memory of anyone taking this photo. My hands shook as I read the accompanying note. "Every warrior needs a talisman. You're not as alone as you think." Someone had been watching me closely enough to photograph intimate moments without my knowledge. Someone knew where I went, what I did, how I lived my daily life. Grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but then stopped. What would I tell them? That someone was giving me expensive gifts and taking pictures of me in public places. That I felt threatened by generosity. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since I was a child. Prayed. "Please," I whispered, holding Tommy close as he slept peacefully against my chest. "If you're listening, help me understand what's happening. Help me protect him." As if in answer to my prayer, my phone buzzed with a text from the mysterious number. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Riverside Park, bench by the duck pond. Come alone with Tommy." It's time you knew the truth. My blood turned to ice. This person knew my schedule. Knew I always took Tommy to feed the ducks on Thursday afternoons. They'd been planning this, orchestrating every moment. I looked down at Tommy. So innocent, so trusting. Whatever this stranger wanted, whatever game they were playing, my grandson was somehow at the center of it. The question was I brave enough to find? Why? I barely slept that night. Every creak of the house, every car that drove past had me checking the windows and gripping my phone like a lifeline. Tommy seemed to sense my anxiety because he woke up 3 times, something he hadn't done in months. By morning, I'd convinced myself I wasn't going to the park. Whatever this person wanted, meeting them seemed like walking directly into danger. But as the day wore on and Tommy grew restless in our small apartment, I found myself getting his diaper bag ready, checking the time. Every few minutes, I needed answers. Living in fear was no way to raise a child. At 2:45, I strapped Tommy into his stroller and walked the 6 blocks to Riverside Park. My legs felt weak and my mouth was dry despite the cool October. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that black sedan following me. The park was busy with the usual Thursday afternoon crowd. Mothers with toddlers, elderly couples feeding, pigeons, teenagers cutting class. Everything looked normal, which somehow made me more nervous. I reached the duck pond at exactly 3:00 p.m. and sat on our usual bench, the one with the best view of the water where Tommy loved to watch the mallards paddle around. I positioned the stroller so I could see in all directions, my hand never leaving the handle. Mrs. Williams. I spun around to find a man approaching from behind a large oak tree. He was older than I'd expected, probably in his late 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple navy jacket and khaki pants, the kind of outfit you'd see on any grandfather spending time at the park. This wasn't the dangerous stranger I'd been imagining. "Please don't be afraid," he said, stopping about 6 feet away and raising his hands slightly. "My name is Richard Morrison. I'm the one who's been sending the packages." "Why?" The word came out as barely a whisper. Richard looked at Tommy, who was gurgling happily at the ducks, completely oblivious to the tension between the adults. "May I sit down? It's a long story." I wanted to say no, to grab Tommy and run, but something in Richard's manner made me pause. He wasn't threatening. If anything, he seemed as nervous as I was. Slowly I said, my voice stronger than I felt. Richard eased himself onto the other end of the bench, maintaining respectful distance between us. Up close, I could see the sadness in his eyes, the kind of deep grief that never fully goes away. 3 years ago I lost my wife, Catherine, he began, his voice quiet but clear. Pancreatic cancer. We fought it for 2 years. Spent everything we had on treatments, experimental procedures, anything that might give us more time. He paused, watching a duck dive underwater for food. Catherine always said she regretted not having children. We tried for years, but it wasn't meant to be. Toward the end, when she knew the cancer was winning, she made me promise something. What kind of promise? She wanted me to use the money we'd saved for retirement, the insurance money, all of it, to help families in need, but not through some big charity where the money disappears into administrative costs. She wanted it to be personal, direct, meaningful. I felt some of my fear beginning to ease, replaced by curiosity. After she died, I didn't know how to honor that promise. I was lost, angry at God, at the world, at myself for not being able to save her. Then about 6 months ago I started monitoring local area codes, looking for people who might need help. Monitoring how? Richard looked embarrassed. I set up a system to catch misdialed calls to certain number ranges. Most of them are wrong numbers for pizza places or businesses, but occasionally I'd intercept something that mattered. A mother calling for help with rent, a father looking for work, an elderly person trying to reach family. The pieces started clicking together in my mind. My text about the formula went to one of the numbers I monitor instead of your neighbors. When I read it, when I saw the desperation and love in those few words, I knew I'd found what Catherine wanted me to find. I stared at him, trying to process what he was telling me. So, you investigated me. Had to make sure the need was real, that you weren't running some kind of scam. I'm sorry about the photographs, about watching you. I needed to understand your situation before I could help properly. The violation still stung, but I was beginning to understand his reasoning. What did you find? Richard's expression grew angry, but not at me. Found a 63-year-old woman working herself to death to care for a grandchild who was abandoned by his parents. I found someone making impossible choices between medication and food, between heat and diapers. Found a warrior. Just like I said in that first text, Tommy chose that moment to drop his favorite toy, and Richard instinctively moved to pick it up. When he handed it back, his eyes lingered on my grandson's face with such tenderness that I felt something shift in my chest. I also found records showing that your daughter and her husband have been posting pictures from expensive restaurants and luxury hotels all over Europe. Richard continued, his voice hardening. While you've been struggling to afford formula. Hearing it stated so bluntly made me feel ashamed and angry at the same time. I don't understand why. You care. You don't know us. Because Catherine would have cared, and because Richard hesitated, then continued. Because I see her in you. The same strength, the same refusal to give up even when everything seems hopeless. We sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks and listening to Tommy's happy babbling. The October sun was starting to set, casting golden light across the pond. What do you want from us? Finally asked. Richard turned to look at me directly. I want to help. No strings attached, no expectations. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes and no family to leave it to. Catherine made me promise to use it to make a difference. And helping you and Tommy feels like the most important thing I could do with it. And if I say no, then I'll respect that. The money I've already sent is yours regardless. But I hope you won't say no, Martha. I hope you let me be part of Tommy's life and yours. There was something in the way he said it that made me look at him more carefully. This wasn't just about honoring his wife's wishes anymore. This was about a lonely man who had found purpose in helping us. I need time to think about this, I said. Richard nodded, standing up slowly. Course, but Martha, there's something else you should know. I hired a private investigator to look into your daughter's situation in Europe. My heart up. What did you find? Sarah and David aren't just extending their stay by choice. They've been lying to you. About everything. David never had a job in Paris. They're living off credit cards and borrowed money, staying in cheap host and pretending to have a glamorous life on social media. The world seemed to tilt sideways. What are you saying? I'm saying they abandoned Tommy not because of work, but because they couldn't handle being parents, and now they're in so much debt that even if they wanted to come back, they probably can't afford to. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It's all in there. Financial records, social media investigations, everything. I'm sorry, Martha. No. This isn't what you wanted to hear. As he walked away, leaving me alone on the bench with Tommy and the devastating truth about my daughter, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my situation was a lie. But for the first time in months, I wasn't facing the truth alone. I spent 3 sleepless nights reading through Richard's evidence about Sarah. The photos were the worst part. Images pulled from her social media accounts showing her and David laughing over wine at outdoor cafes, posing in front of monuments, living the carefree life of young travelers while I scraped together enough money for Tommy's next meal. It was the financial records that really broke my heart. Credit card statements showing they'd maxed out every account. Hotel bills that revealed they weren't staying in the luxury accommodations their Instagram posts suggested, but in host and cheap motel, records of bounced checks, declined payments mounting. They hadn't abandoned Tommy for a better life. They'd abandoned him because they were running from their responsibilities, and taking care of a baby didn't fit with their fantasy of escaping reality. On the fourth day, Richard called. "Martha, I know this is a lot to process. Would you like to meet again? Maybe somewhere more private this time." I looked around my small apartment at Tommy playing on a blanket surrounded by the expensive toys Richard had sent. "You can come here," I said. "I think we need to talk." When Richard arrived that evening, he looked different than he had at the park, less formal, more vulnerable. He wore a simple sweater and jeans, and he'd brought a bouquet of flowers, not expensive roses or exotic orchids, but cheerful daisies from the grocery store. "For you," he said, seeming almost shy as he handed them over. Catherine always said daisies were honest flowers, no pretense, just simple beauty. I put them in an old mason jar, the only vase I owned, and felt something warm spread through my chest. It had been years since anyone had brought me flowers. Even when Sarah's father was still in the picture, he'd been more practical than romantic. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked. "That would be nice." As I prepared the coffee, Richard sat on my small couch, and Tommy immediately crawled over to investigate this new person. I watched nervously as my grandson pulled himself up on Richard's legs. But Richard's face lit up with such genuine joy that my anxiety melted away. "Hello there, little man," Richard said softly, letting Tommy grab his finger. "You're getting so big, aren't you?" "He likes you," I observed, settling into my armchair with 2 mugs of coffee. "Hope so. I don't have much experience with babies, but I've always wanted to learn." There was something wistful in his voice that made me study his face more carefully. "You said you and your wife never had children. Did you want them?" Richard's expression grew distant. "More than anything, we tried for 15 years before we finally accepted it wasn't going to happen." Catherine used to joke that we had enough love for a house full of kids, but nowhere to put it. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "That must have been hard." It was. But Catherine always said everything happens for a reason, even if we can't see it at time. He looked down at Tommy, who is now contentedly chewing on Richard's watch band. "Maybe this is the reason. Maybe we were meant to save our love for Tommy." The way he said our love made my heart skip. This wasn't just about charity anymore. Richard was talking about something deeper, more permanent. "Richard," I said carefully, "what exactly are you suggesting?" He took a deep breath as if he'd been preparing for this question. "I'm suggesting that you don't have to do this alone anymore. I'm suggesting that maybe Tommy needs a grandfather figure, and maybe I need to feel useful again." "And what about me? What do I need?" Richard met my eyes directly. "I think you need someone who sees how strong you are, how much you've sacrificed, how much you love that little boy. I think you need someone who wants to help carry the load instead of adding to it." I felt tears building behind my eyes. When was the last time anyone had acknowledged what I'd been carrying alone? "I know this is sudden," Richard continued. "I know you barely know me, but Martha, I haven't felt this alive, this purposeful since Catherine died, helping you and Tommy. It's given me something to wake up for." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Sarah's number flashed on the screen. "Answer it," Richard said quietly. "It's time to hear what she has to say." I accepted the call, putting it on speaker so Richard could hear. Sarah's voice was strained, different from the carefree tone I'd heard before. "How's Tommy doing?" "Everything okay. Everything's fine, Sarah. We're managing. Listen, Mom. Need to ask you something, and please don't be mad. David and I are having some financial difficulties over here. The job situation isn't as stable as we thought, and we were wondering, could you possibly lend us some money just to get us through the next few weeks?" I looked at Richard, who was shaking his head in disbelief. "How much money, Sarah?" "Well, we owe about $3,000 on our credit cards, and our rent is due, and we need plane tickets if we're going to come home for Christmas." "Wait," I interrupted. "Come home for Christmas? What about Tommy?" There was a pause. "What about him? Are you planning to take him back?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, we've been talking. Honestly, Tommy is doing so well with you. You're amazing with him, and he's so attached to you now. We were thinking, maybe it would be best if he just stayed put for a while longer." I felt Richard's hand touch my shoulder, steady and supportive. "Sarah," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "Me ask you something. Do you love your son?" "Course I love him." "What kind of question is that? Then why haven't you sent a single dollar to help with his care? Why haven't you called to check on him in 2 weeks? Why are you asking me for money when you know I'm barely making ends meet taking care of the child you abandoned?" "I didn't abandon. I left him with his grandmother who loves him." "You lied to me, Sarah." "Lied about David's job, about the temporary housing, about coming back in 6 months. You've been posting pictures of your European vacation while I've been choosing between my arthritis medication and Tommy's formula." Could hear Sarah crying on the other end of the line, but for the first time, her tears didn't manipulate me into backing down. "Mom, please. We're desperate. We just need help getting back on our feet. And then we can figure out what's best for Tommy." "No, Sarah. I'm done being your safety net while you pretend to be living your best life. If you want to be Tommy's mother, then come home and be his mother. If you want to keep playing house in Europe, then sign over guardianship to me legally so I can make medical decisions and get him enrolled in daycare. You can't give me an ultimatum." "I'm not giving you an ultimatum. I'm telling you the truth. Either you're Tommy's mother or you're not. You can't be both when it's convenient." Richard squeezed my shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "I need time to think," Sarah said, her voice small. "You've had 9 months to think. Figure it out, Sarah. Don't call me asking for money again until you've decided whether you want to be a mother or a tourist." I hung up before she could respond. The apartment fell silent except for Tommy's happy babbling as he played with the blocks Richard had brought him. "That was incredibly brave," Richard said softly. "That was long overdue," I replied, surprised by how liberated I felt. Richard stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street where we'd first met. "Martha, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there's no pressure either way." My heart started beating faster. "I've been alone for 3 years. You've been essentially alone for 9 months. We're both too old for games and too tired for anything that isn't real." He turned to face me. "What would you think about not being alone anymore?" I looked at this kind man who had appeared in my life like an answer to prayers I'd been too proud to voice. "Are you asking me on a date, Richard Morrison?" He smiled and his whole face transformed. "I'm asking you to consider letting me love you both. Tommy needs stability and you need support and I need purpose. Maybe we can give each other what we all need." Tommy chose that moment to take his first unsteady steps across the room, lurching from the coffee table toward Richard's outstretched arms. We both gasped as my grandson toddled the 3 feet between them, collapsing into Richard's embrace with a triumphant giggle. "Did you see that?" Richard whispered, his voice thick with emotion. His first steps. As I watched this gentle man hold my grandson, both of them glowing with joy at this milestone moment, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected gifts come disguised as strangers with sad eyes and generous hearts. "Yes," I said, though I wasn't just answering his question about Tommy's steps. "Yes, I saw it." 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of Richard's house, our house now, watching through the window as he pushed Tommy on the swing set he'd had installed in the backyard. At 14 months old, my grandson was walking confidently and saying his first words, "Mama for me and Papa for Richard." The legal guardianship papers had come through 3 weeks ago. Sarah had finally made her choice, signing over temporary custody, while she and David tried to sort out their lives in Europe. She'd called exactly once since then, a tearful conversation where she'd apologized for everything and promised to visit soon. Wasn't holding my breath. Richard had proposed on a Tuesday morning in February while we were feeding Tommy breakfast. Nothing dramatic or elaborate. He'd simply set a small velvet box next to my coffee cup and said, "Catherine always said that when you find your family, you know it." On mine. The ring was simple. A single diamond on a gold band that had belonged to his grandmother. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for my finger all along. We'd married in a small ceremony at the courthouse with Tommy as our only witness. Judge Martinez had smiled as she performed the ceremony, commenting that she'd never seen a happier family. Now, as I watched Richard lift Tommy high into the air, both of them laughing with pure joy, I marveled at how much our lives had changed. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment my old anxiety flared, conditioned by months of dreading Sarah's calls. The message was from my neighbor Mrs. Chen, the woman I'd originally meant to text that desperate night. "Martha, just wanted to say how happy I am for you and Tommy. Richard is a wonderful man and you both deserve this joy. Would you like to bring Tommy over for dinner this weekend? I made too much soup again." I smiled, typing back my acceptance. The neighborhood had taken a while to adjust to the changes in my life, but gradually the whispers and suspicious looks had given way to genuine happiness for our little family. "Mama, Mama," Tommy called from the backyard, pointing excitedly at a butterfly that had landed on his finger. I hurried outside. Richard already crouched beside Tommy, both of them studying the delicate orange and black wings. "Look at that, buddy," Richard said softly. "It's a monarch butterfly. They travel thousands of miles to find their home." Tommy giggled as the butterfly fluttered away, then toddled over to me and wrapped his arms around my legs. "Up, Mama." I lifted him, marveling at how heavy he'd gotten, how sturdy and healthy he looked. The thin, often hungry baby I'd struggled to feed was now a thriving toddler with chubby cheeks and bright eyes. "Richard," I said, settling onto the porch steps with Tommy on my lap, "do you ever wonder if this is all too good to be true?" He sat beside me, his arm coming around my shoulders in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing every day. But then I remember what Catherine used to say about miracles. What did she say? That they're not always dramatic. Sometimes a miracle is just getting exactly what you need, exactly when you need it, even if you didn't know you needed it. I leaned into his warmth, watching Tommy play with the wedding ring on my finger. "I never thought I'd get married again. After Sarah's father left, I convinced myself that I was better off alone. Were you happy before Tommy? Before me? I considered the question honestly. Was surviving. I was proud of my independence. Proud that I'd raised Sarah on my own and built a life that was stable if not exciting but happy. I don't think I remembered what that felt like. Richard pressed a kiss to the top of my head. And now I wake up every morning grateful. Not just for the financial security, though that's wonderful, but for this, for having someone to share Tommy's milestones with, someone to worry with when he's teething, someone to laugh with when he does something adorable, someone to grow old with, Richard added quietly. We're already old, I pointed out, making him chuckle. We're seasoned. There's a difference. Tommy had fallen asleep against my chest, his small fist clutched around my finger. The afternoon sun was warm on our faces, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of children playing. Martha, Richard said, his voice careful. Got a call from my lawyer today. My contentment wavered. About what? About making this permanent. The adoption process, I mean. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to legally adopt Tommy. Give him our name. Make sure that no matter what happens with Sarah in the future, he has the security of knowing where he belongs. Tears pricked my eyes. All the chaos of the past year, I hadn't even considered that possibility. But hearing Richard say it, I realized how much I wanted it too. You want to be his grandfather legally, not just in practice. I want to be his grandfather in every way that matters. And I want him to be our son, not just yours. I looked down at Tommy, so peaceful in sleep, his dark lashes casting shadows on his cheeks. He would never remember the months of struggle, the fear and uncertainty. His earliest memories would be of this house, this security, this love. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I want that too. Just then my phone rang. Sarah's number appeared on the screen, and for the first time in months I didn't feel that familiar dread. Answer it, Richard said gently. Whatever she has to say, we'll handle it together. Accepted the call but didn't put it on speaker this time. Tommy was sleeping and Richard was beside me. I was ready to face whatever came next. Hi, Sarah. Mom. Her voice was different, quieter, more mature somehow. How are you? How's Tommy? We're doing well. Very well, actually. I saw the pictures you posted on Facebook of Tommy with the man you married. He looks happy. I glanced at Richard, who was listening but giving me the space to handle this my way. He is happy. We all are. I'm glad. I really am, Mom. I know I messed up badly. I know I hurt you and abandoned Tommy. And I know saying sorry isn't enough. No, it's not enough, but it's a start. David and I are coming home next month. We finally saved enough for plane tickets and we found jobs in Portland. Nothing glamorous but honest work. That's good, Sarah. I'm proud of you for taking responsibility. I want to see Tommy. I know I don't have any rights anymore, and I know he probably doesn't even remember me, but I want to try to be part of his life again. Even if it's just as his aunt or family friend. I felt Richard's hand squeeze mine, offering silent support. We can arrange visits, I said carefully. Supervised at first until Tommy gets comfortable with you again. But Sarah, you need to understand something. Richard and I are adopting Tommy. This is his home now and we're his parents. You can be part of his life, but you can't disrupt his stability. There was a long pause. Then I heard her crying softly. I understand. And I think that's probably best for him. I mean, he deserves parents who put him first. And I wasn't ready to do that before. And now I know the difference between wanting to be a mother and being ready to be one. Maybe someday I'll be ready. But right now I just want to make sure Tommy knows I love him even if I can't take care of him the way he deserves. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering dusk with my husband and our sleeping son, feeling a peace I'd never expected to find. How do you feel about that? Richard asked. Hopeful, I said, surprising myself. For the first time. She sounded like she understood what she'd done and why it was wrong. Maybe she really is growing up. And if she wants to be part of Tommy's life. I looked at the man who had given me everything I'd never dared to hope for. Then she'll learn that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day in big ways and small ways. Choosing to get up in the middle of the night when he's sick. It's choosing to put his needs before your wants. Choosing to stay when things get hard. Richard smiled, understanding the deeper meaning in my words. It's choosing each other. It's choosing each other. Agreed. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't about young passion or dramatic romance. Sometimes they're about two people who have lived long enough to know what really matters, finding each other when they need it most. Sometimes they're about a warrior woman who thought she'd fight alone forever, discovering that the greatest victories are the ones shared with the people who choose to stay and fight beside you. Tommy stirred in my arms, opened his eyes, and smiled sleepily at the two faces looking down at him with such love. "Mama, Papa," he whispered, then closed his eyes and went back to sleep. We were home. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family as we are looking forward to our first 10,000 subscribers, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You don't want to miss the next story.